your head or your heart that made the decision? And, you know, which one do you rely on more? This thing of balancing the head and the heart, what are we looking at? Finding a 50-50 kind of a designation there, that is 50% the head and it's 50% the heart. I don't really think so. I think that at any moment in time it can be 100% one, and at another moment in time it can be 100% the other. And so there's also the inference, I think, in talking about finding the balance, the assumption rather, that at some point there may have been a balance. They may have worked equitably in tandem with each other, but somehow the balance has shifted and one can be in the ascendancy at any moment and the other will have its turn. And I think one of the things that maybe sometimes in trying to work it all out, and maybe not a good solution, but sometimes it may even be that we give the work which is principally of one, we give the responsibility for that to the other. And it doesn't always work. Like, for example, what happens when the heart gets hurt? That depending, it may not be everyone's experience, and it may not just be a one-off experience, but maybe over a period of time and in different circumstances, the heart keeps being upset or hurt or whatever, and so then the intellect steps up to bat. And what does the intellect say? I'll protect you, you know. And so then the intellect takes on, and when I talk about the head, I'm principally referring to the intellect, takes on the veneer of protector, and may even create like a firewall around the heart, and will the appearances of aloofness and of detachment, you know, and we've created this firewall and you don't have permission to enter. You know, there's a line which you shall not cross, because I am afraid that if you are allowed in, you are going to hurt me, you know. And so the intellect, your friend, is doing the job of the guardsman. You know, he's supposedly protecting you, but ultimately what happens is that the intellect, with the kind of wisdom it has or doesn't have, imprisons you. And so your heart in that scenario becomes smaller and more hidden. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Do any of you have that experience?
Yes.
Right. And so and the intellect continues to do its job, and the heart kind of gets lost, and it no longer has free expression. And what is the job of the heart anyway? Is to feel, is to love. I think one of the jobs of the heart, the essential job of the heart, a healthy heart that is, not one that's constricted, but a healthy heart is to be able to merge things. That whatever comes, that you're able to, because the heart has its own innate wisdom, and that its job is to merge things. The intellect's job is to discern and maybe to count and to keep score. That really isn't the job of the heart. The heart's job is not to count. You know, the intellect will do that on the heart's behalf, but it's the heart that then suffers the consequences. And so the heart that is able to merge, can you see how that is? I was just, you know, saying to someone last night and actually witnessing this, you know, how things that maybe would have been said that would be at one level perhaps insulting or a chastisement or something else. And a heart with a great deal of sensitivity is going to be wounded, is going to be offended, is going to be upset. But the consciousness is, because there's more of a balance between the intellect and the heart, is kind of keep swallowing. Just keep swallowing, not even finding fault with the other person, in that that's where they're at, and that's their job at the moment is maybe to be insulting or to give sorrow or whatever, but I'm not buying today, thank you very much. And so that you merge it, and the most important thing is you keep on stepping, you keep on moving. And so maybe the flip side, if we reverse it and say, how can the heart maybe get in the way of the intellect? So the intellect, just by way of participation or sharing, what are the words, what are the adjectives or even adverbs or whatever else that we might use to describe the heart? Give me some. Good, bad, or indifferent.
Sensitive.
Sensitive heart.
Love.
Loving heart, loveful heart. Open heart. Compassionate heart. Tender heart. Sweet heart.
Hard heart.
Happy.
Hard heart.
It would come from a guy, wouldn't it? Actually, that's one that would be applied to the head as well. But hard-hearted, cold-hearted. Yeah, because it ain't all happy sounds when it comes to the heart. What other ones would we use?
Mean.
Mean-hearted. Mean-hearted.
Kind.
Kind-hearted.
Faithful.
Faithful heart. Grateful heart. Tender heart. Soft heart. What about the intellect?
Forgive heart.
Or even head?
Forgive.
Forgiving, yeah. What about the head? What are the adjectives we would use for the head? Hard-headed.
Yes.
Hard-headed.
Calculating.
Calculating, but that would be specific, you know.
Thoughtful.
Well, no, where you would actually use the word, it would precede head, you know. So like pig-headed. Somebody's pig-headed, right? Is that worse than hard-headed?
Yeah,
Probably. It's hard-headed with 4 legs. What else? Dunderhead. Dunderhead, haven't heard that in a while. That sort of is casting doubts about somebody's intelligence, right? If you're a dunderhead. Is that what it means? Is that what a dunderhead is?
Can you be open-minded? Is that okay?
Oh, of course, you can be open-minded, but I'm just thinking in terms of, because the topic was head and heart, so just trying to see what are the norms or what are the words that we use.
How about knowledgeable?
No, you made that up. No, bullheaded. Very interesting. They're all like, and what is the image that comes with all of those things? It's somebody who's very stubborn, obstinate, entrenched, lightheaded. There you go, lightheaded. That's kind of a medical condition. No. What else? Yeah, they said big head. What about a big head? Yeah.
Swelled head.
Right. Swelled head. Yeah. Very interesting. All the ones for the head. Can't we come up with something good? I'm certainly not here to promote heart over head. That would be like, you know, promoting one leg over the other. But
Wise head.
you made that one up.
But if it works, even if it's made up, it's good.
Don't worry, she can handle it. Yeah, and so if we're reversing that situation of how the the intellect makes allowances and tries to protect the heart. And so, as you say, that the thing is that sometimes the head can be swollen or big, which in other words, it could be reduced to just a state of great arrogance. And so that I'm better, you know, I'm clever, and so on. And so what would the heart do in that situation? You would shrink it, exactly. Very good. And what would be the means that the heart might employ to shrink it?
Kindness.
Oh, that's nice.
Compassion.
Oh, you're all so nice. No, I was thinking that in the same way that the intellect, in trying to protect the heart, actually entraps it. And so the other way around too, that sometimes the heart or whatever, because it's to do with appearance and image, and so not wanting to appear arrogant or big-headed, and so we'll make fun of it. We'll diminish it by making fun of it. But then that can result in irony at best, but cynicism and sarcasm, you know. And you've heard people talk about themselves in that way. It's kind of like putting themselves down a little bit, and the sort of meta message is, I don't want you to think that I think that I'm really intelligent or that I'm smarter than you are, you know. And so it's trying to observe, you know, and you're all of you who are here are interested in self-development, and I think a big part of it is self-revelation, you know. And the very first teachings of Raj Yoga are to do with the intrinsic qualities of the soul. And so it's almost like with that stock in hand, in a sense, knowing that I am essentially good, that I am essentially loving, that I am essentially innocent and happy, all of those nice traits, can arm me, in a sense, to go about discovering the thorns that interfere with the expression of those qualities. And so I think that in this game of the heart and the head, that things get hidden. And something that I've seen over a long period of time is one's own cleverness in hiding things from oneself. And the tendency is, what is it you want to hide? Is it you want to hide your greatness? Is it you want to hide your light? Is it that you want to hide your attributes, your goodness? No, we want to hide our defects, our lack of whatever. And what do we do with them? We gussy them up so that they look like something different from what they really are. And I've shared many times, you know, my own first time I became aware of it. And I had gone to live in the meditation center in London, and you know, had the great good fortune of being with the most senior members of the Brahma Kumaris, the one who is today the head of the Brahma Kumaris. And I'm raw, really raw. I just wasn't that long involved with the BKs, and somehow by accident ended up being in the center. And before which, in describing myself, and pay attention to how you describe yourself, I would always have said, I'm very independent. My nature is very independent. And it's not that I'm going to say different today, but what I realized living with these wonderful, clean mirrors in front of me was that that was really another word, a euphemism for my selfishness. Yeah, yeah. And so, like, in other words, the manifestation would be, if you don't want to do it my way, I'm going to going to do it my way anyway. And, and you can sit there. So I'm thinking I'm being independent, but it really wasn't true independence. Because every single quality that's worth the name will have love stitched in there somewhere, and not selfishness, you know, whatever it happens to be. So check for yourself. I could give you a litany of things that I've discovered about myself and how I presented it as one thing, and later on discovered that it was a cover for something else. And so, why do we do that?
Don't we all do this?
I said we.
We, yes, we do
I
it.
didn't just mean me.
No, I know, we do it, because we're afraid.
Protection. Protection, we're afraid. You're afraid people won't love us.
Yes.
Or you'll
Ego.
be challenged. Ego, of course, of course, of course. And so part of the work here is, and the beautiful thing is that the revelations, it's not like somebody's going to force you and say, admit you're this, you're that, you're the other. No, they will come at the right time. And they will come in such a way that you're able to laugh about them. You're able to see the game that you played with yourself, and you're also able to share it with others. You know, that it's no longer such a thorn.
Does that happen when you're level-headed?
Well, I'll check the next time it happens and I'll get back to you. Because I don't doubt there's more to come. There's another thing that I've seen, and again, those of you who are students of Raja will have heard me speak about this before, so at the risk of boring you, that it has been my experience that when people come to the meditation center, or here, as is the case, and they're interested in things of the spirit, you know, which means, of course, the heart is going to be a component, the head is going to be a component. But I often see that one thing or the other is more pronounced. It could almost be like, say, a husband and wife coming, and you know, just for the sake of distinction, and I'm not saying it always works like this, but say, for example, that the man is more interested in things of the head, and the woman is more interested in things of the heart. And the way that I define them is that either they come in the guise of a philosopher, or they come in the guise of a devotee. And so you can say male, female, you can say head, heart, you can say east, west, any of those things. And so each has their qualities, and each has their weaknesses. And so, for instance, the philosopher, they will be more independent, as a rule, and but they'll want proof of everything. Whatever you tell them is kind of like, show me, prove it to me. In other words, they're not going to accept things like that. It's the head at work, it's the analysis, it's the research. What else? What other components are there? Logic, absolutely. It's the logic. In other words, if it's not logical, then it, you know, it has no business in my way of seeing things, in my view. And whereas the other side, when I say devotee, I don't mean somebody who's like running around praying and adoring things, no. But that they would be more intuitive and more perceptive. And I've seen this countless times. And it doesn't always work that the woman's the one who's intuitive and perceptive. And for them, you won't have to prove anything. They just get it like that, you know. Yeah. And so then seeing sometimes looking at yourself, because this is the topic today, you know, just think for yourself, which side would you be inclined to fall on? Which camp would you count yourself in? That you're intuitive, perceptive, and again, don't tell me you're both, because I don't buy the 50-50 business, that there's always one that's a little bit more utilized than the other. So do you see for yourself, who would say they're heart people? Wow. And head? Who are the philosophers? Yeah. And the thing is, when I, and again, on the one hand, the philosopher may be the independent one, but could also be the lone wolf, you know, that not for any reason other than that they don't find it so easy to socialize and to engage at that level of feelings, etc. And the devotee, they will be more inclined, and again, as I say, it could be traditional in that sense of what I was seeing, you know, when I was in Asia just now, that unlike, say, America in particular, which is very much about the individual, you know, you are who you are, go for it, whatever you want to do, go get it, you know, the Daniel Boone type thing. Whereas in Asia, it's much more about the inclusivity and about the whole and about the family and about the community and so on and so forth. I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong, but it's just, you know, seeing it in that kind of a way. And then the thing is, if I'm, you know, lopsided in one direction, then it's like I have to kind of straighten out the other. And of course, the one who's intuitive will often also suffer from sensitivity, oversensitivity, and not necessarily sensitivity about something that's done or said to them, but they're sensitive on everybody else's behalf as well. They feel everybody else's pain, and I mean, is that the way we want to be? I don't think so. No, we can be compassionate and merciful without necessarily, you know, being in that experience of sorrow. And so then what to do? And again, I've seen situations where you assume that because someone is super intelligent, you wrongly assume that they are also emotionally aligned and smart, and
Sure.
it very well may not be the case.
And some people are street smart, but they don't have the intelligence.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
We have a husband and wife here, from France. I'm curious from what you said. Yeah.
He's head. He's heart.
Right, and my heart. I am paradise.
That's very nice. That's very nice. Yeah.
That's a mixed.
Yes. No, that's it. And then, as I say, it's not about being 50-50, but it's about knowing. Now, in the Brahma Kumaris or Raj Yoga, I don't know which name you're familiar with, but there are words that we use for the intellect. One of them is a faithful intellect. A faithful intellect, yeah. And so it doesn't just, we're not talking in terms of, what's the word when a couple are true to each other? Fidelity. It's not about fidelity in that sense, in that limited sense, but an intellect that's filled with faith, you know, and the manifestation of it would be in action, trust, you know, which is an element of the heart, if you like. And so a faithful intellect, a divine intellect, which means that you're not going to be, you know, again, using your head in a limited way to try to sort things out. But a divine intellect is like a big or a far-sighted intellect. The two go together, that you're not just looking at something in the immediate situation, but it's almost like you're able to see how it happened, where it came from, and by certain applications, where it could go, what could be the end result. And when you practice that over a long period of time, the result is almost like as if you're super intuitive. But it's really a function of a speeded up, like the RPMs of the intellect have increased on the basis of, you know, your observation and application over a long period of time. So what else do we say? Faithful intellect, divine intellect, far-reaching, far-sighted intellect. So the far-sighted intellect really is able to, whilst being in the present, is able simultaneously to operate in the past and in the future. You know, that it's not just here. The other thing that that intellect will be able to do is to rise above, and that there is the very first requirement in order to be able to go above something, I think, is that you immediately accept whatever has just happened. You're not wrestling with it, you're not groveling in it, but you say, it's done. You accept it, and it's like your consciousness, your energy can instantly shift. So then you go into another space, you're seeing it from another dimension as well. So I don't know how we're doing for time, but when it gets to the how to, then the head, as mentioned, it can often veer off into just a thing to do with the ego. And very often the heart complications will come from attachments. Attachments not only to a way of being or to things or people, but a way of seeing. And in both instances, the ego is involved. Not arrogance per se, but ego as in a wrong definition of oneself, or a limited definition of oneself. And then, of course, I'm going to say the how to. I'll come back to the two component parts of Raj Yoga, which is the knowledge, which Tatiana mentioned. The knowledge in order, like the intellect needs to be cleaned in a kind of a way. It also needs, mechanically speaking, to be more refined. And so, again, just like with an engine or whatever, you want to it to operate in a different way, then you put even more refined gasoline into it or whatever. And so you start feeding the intellect with what I would say is spiritual knowledge, and that is allowing you to perceive yourself and everything that extends from that. The beginning is yourself, in a different light, in a different way. And then for the heart to be healed from its grievances, from its inability to forgive, its inability to forget, the same thing, then it needs a clean source of energy, you know, that is different from what it is used to. And at the present time, there's a tiredness that we all experience that comes from the heaviness of dealing with human energy. Or you can put it another way and say karmic accounts, or what, karmic accounts?
Yeah.
Karma. There's karma between people, you know, and then we get trapped in anger and, give me some more words there.
Mistrust.
Mistrust, thank you.
Greed.
Greed.
Frustration.
Frustration, good, come on.
Lust.
Ooh, that's a big one. Yeah.
Disappointment.
Huh?
Disappointment.
Disappointment, that's a huge one. That's a huge one. It's like we've been seduced by so many things, or by the promise, but no satisfaction. Mick Jagger. Get no satisfaction. Seduction, but no satisfaction. Right? And so that thing of we need a respite from human energy, you know, and do we even know that another kind of energy exists? Yes, we do. And we know it intuitively, and we know it in our quieter moments, and we know it from another place, and that is because somewhere you have had it. You have lived that experience. May not be in recorded history, but you, the soul, as an eternal, immortal entity, have known that experience. And so then it's kind of like going on a fast from human energy. How much time do you think it would take to fast from human energy to be able to recalibrate the soul? How long do you think it would take? Somebody's laughing. What?
I feel like that's a trick question.
You might be right, because you could say millennium, right?
Yes.
A millennium.
Infinite, it never stops.
Yes, no, but that's it. You can't say, you know, stop the planet kind of thing, I want to get off. But this is where meditation comes in. And so you're not going anywhere, you can be here. And it's not about removing yourself from society, but it is about taking your consciousness somewhere else and discovering that you can travel. You can go on to another level of where you're absorbing something different, and the output also becomes different. Or what you're dealing with really is just a far more subtle and refined kind of energy. And so then the intellect with knowledge as to who it is that you are in the context of eternity turns the mind, because it's the intellect that has jurisdiction over the mind. But at the present time, the mind, which is full of what?
Garbage.
Thank you. And so that's what the intellect has been feeding from. And so is it any wonder that the intellect can't do what it was designed to do, which is to make decisions, to be, you know, discerning, etc.? I've been feeding it that garbage that's in my mind. And so now the intellect with knowledge is going to decide the type or the quality of thoughts that have leeway to enter the mind. And that makes all the difference. And so that's the beginning of the process. And as I say, it sounds mechanical. There is a mechanical aspect to it. But ultimately, the thoughts, the quantity of thoughts is reduced, the quality of thoughts changed, therefore the energy also changes, but gradually it becomes so refined that it's not any longer about, you know, even 5 or 6 thoughts, but it's just one elongated thought that becomes pure experience, pure consciousness. And then you know that you're connecting with that source of the purest love, the highest expression of love, of which you are also, in a manner of speaking, a part. That is the currency that is exchanged. And so that you have the capacity, you know, for that currency within you, you can hold that energy of divine love. And it is that that starts making the difference as to what has accumulated in your heart that is no longer serving you, and to that which has rendered the intellect arrogant and ineffective. And the thing is, part of the choice, because we're at that time when this together is what we are all choosing. We want change, and yet we're scared of it as well. And so part of the choice, I think, is as to whether the change or the renewal or the recalibrating comes about through like being softened.
And it feels good.
And it feels good. And it feels good. I agree with you. So either being softened or being, what word can I use? The opposite, like being punched. Punched. If we're talking about karma, we're talking about change. And it's that thing again of moving even from what I've hidden from myself into revealing it to myself. The universe, I've said this every time I'm here, I think, the universe is kindly disposed towards us. It wants to get us back to where we want to be, actually. You know, but we keep saying, oh, go away, not just yet, you know, I'll come later, tomorrow. And it'll keep ringing the bell, and just it'll keep getting louder and louder. And so it's like the difference sometimes in, how are we doing for time, Ross? We should wind up.
We need to meditate.
Okay, just one last point then. Where was I? Forgotten. Yeah, it's like the difference. It's like the difference in, say, getting what do you call it? Chicken pox. You know, when you're 5 years old, and getting it when you're 55.
That's true.
Yeah. And so one is you make the choice. I want the soft version, and so I'm willing to work with this energy and work on myself to help bring me back to where I'm supposed to be, and so that the universe can complete itself. You know, that you're a contributing aspect to that. Om Shanti.